You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
So we have the NACS Show in Atlanta, and of course it's the big expo, it's connections, it's general sessions, it's education sessions, but it's also the city itself. So today we're going to take an insider's look at some of the unique food finds that are around Atlanta, both convenience stores and otherwise. Joining us for the conversation today is Mike Jordan. He is a culture and food writer and very familiar with Atlanta and he's very good at his job because he's been nominated for a James Beard Award for his coverage of writing around the food culture in Atlanta. So thanks for joining us today, Mike.
Hey, great to be here, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
So nominated for a James Beard, and you're also in the NACS Magazine doing a story on food, but let's just set up the big picture. Food writers, culture writers, how do you look at things a little differently whether it's a convenience store or whether it's a restaurant? I know that I have friends who are musicians, and you can't go to a show with them without them walking the whole place. It's like, here's the stage, here's this, what's the acoustics like? They just think different. So is it a little like with you? Are there certain cues that you look for that says, this place is worth checking out, or this is a watch out?
Yeah, when it comes to the food the food coverage and how it does relate to those super inside baseball sorts of industries and vices and entertainment forms, I always go in basing my experience on how much can I tell that there is some care and some intentionality going on in this place. So that doesn't always mean that a place is spick and span, up to down marble. It doesn't have to be the newest place, the fanciest place. It doesn't have to be the cutest neighborhood place. But how much can I tell from coming into the parking lot, walking in the door, speaking to someone, sitting down, looking at the decoration and the decor around me, seeing the interaction or the time that other customers or other patrons are having? How much does it look like this was done intentionally, or once we figured out what we were doing, we are intentionally keeping this thing that we are lucky enough to have created? But I look for a place that's going to have something that's all on its own, that has some type of way of differentiating itself. And then after that, one of the biggest components, I think, in food writing is consistency. You did it once, but can you do it again? Can you do it 3 times? Can I send some people over there and will you give them the same experience? So that's one of the things that people leave out, is reporting based on a consistency of experience. So intentional and then consistency.
It's interesting you mentioned consistency, and can they do the same thing over and over again? And we've been to a couple convenience stores that have exceptional food, we've been to a lot that have exceptional food, but there are a couple that were actually opened by people that formerly were pilots. And first question, it's like, okay, there's more than one person that's a pilot that opened a restaurant. Why? And they said, because it's the checklist. It is consistency. It's not going off the recipe. It's not saying, hey, today I'm going to throw a little bit more of this in there. It's you nail the recipe, you figure out tweaks along the way, but you don't freeform it, just like you don't freeform as a pilot. You kind of go through this and you say, we have a goal. Our goal is either landing a plane or it's delivering that great customer experience, and we're going to do it very consistently.
Mm-hmm. It's so important in food. I mean, there's so much food out there. And even what we're talking about today, Atlanta specifically, I don't know if it's just the South, but I think Atlanta has it a little bit extra, as we say. It's one thing that you can find a lot of restaurants in Atlanta, but in Atlanta, it's one of those cities where there's literally food everywhere. Like, it's hard to go somewhere and they're not trying to stuff you. But when you have food everywhere, what is it that makes someone say, you know what, I'm going to go back to that place? So the consistency of experience on the owner and the operator side becomes the consistency of support from the customer side and that word of mouth piece, because you can find an egg roll and wings anywhere you go in Atlanta. I mean, maybe on the ground sometimes, but I mean, they might be maybe still warm. It's been pretty hot this summer.
Hmm. We'll get a little bit into the convenience stores that you wrote up about, but I want to stay on what you're just talking about with the Atlanta food. It's really exploded there in terms of how it's perceived, and all the new restaurateurs and all the new types of cuisine. Is there a specific thing that Atlanta is known for now in food? I think when you don't go to an area, you just come up with whatever, something that you read somewhere, but that's seldom what the communities actually like. So, what are some of the types of restaurant trends, whether it's fancy or whether it's just down home eating?
Well, I would say for quite a while, Atlanta, again, being geographically, a southeastern place. It's in Georgia, which people forget is the South. But it's Atlanta was known for some of the basic sort of things that you would expect southern states to have. So soul food and southern food and country fried foods and, stick to your ribs types
Hmm.
of food. So you go to the South and to Atlanta looking for barbecue, and you go looking for, those meals that are going to sit you down for the evening. But Atlanta is also the home of the world's busiest airport, Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. And it always is a reminder to people who come to Atlanta and don't expect to find so much global cuisine. So I tell people that's one of the easiest straight lines to draw. The airport that can get you almost anywhere on this planet in a direct flight, and a sprawling city, metropolitan area that has every type of cuisine you can imagine, but people don't always expect that to be the case. So we're still, as a city, getting people to venture out in this city beyond what they traditionally would expect of a southern city like Atlanta. So chicken and waffles, shrimp and grits, all of those things are never going to go away. We celebrate them and we love them. But this is a city that has a much bigger presence of fine global cuisine than anyone that's not here is probably aware of. And even some of our people who live here could use some refreshers. And that's what keeps me employed.
So I know one of the things they say when you go to grocery stores is never go there hungry. Also, never record a podcast on food when it's getting close to a mealtime. So mistake number one.
Yeah,
I think I want some chicken and waffles now. But
yeah.
um, I want to talk about, like, you had some really cool convenience store finds that you wrote up in NACS Magazine. We'll start with the first one is Mount Perrin, if I pronounced it right, the country store. And
That's
there's Mr.
correct.
Pete there. And it sounds like a pretty cool experience.
It was a really unique experience. I mean, it, you imagine Buckhead, which is, if people who are familiar with Buckhead, it is it is called, nicknamed like the Beverly Hills Rodeo Drive of Atlanta. So it's a wealthier area. It's like the financial center, but it's got these beautiful neighborhoods with mansions. The governor's mansion is on West Paces Ferry, and all back in those hills and those kind of high areas, you see all kinds of gated, beautiful properties. And then all of a sudden you come upon this log cabin, and it's the most surreal experience that in the middle of all this wealth and all of this real estate and architectural beauty and just like, people who are titans of whatever they do, there's this old country grocery store slash convenience store, not a grocery store, a convenience store with gas. And you walk in, and I mean, everything about it is like you just dropped a building from the 1800s into this wealthy neighborhood, but you got some things that are modern as well as very old timey and traditional. It's just an amazing place that, I would tell everybody it should be on a must visit list, whether you are stopping for a convenience store things or not. It's just a very cool little thing to exist where it does.
And it's not the log cabin, and it's not that alone. It's not the amazing prices and a hamburger for under $4. Are you kidding? You can stick a one there and not feel bad about that. 14 instead of 4. But you also talked about the people there. And it's just, I think that's part of the intentionality that you were talking about earlier, where it's not that it's a cool location. It's not that there's pretty good food. It's that you want to hang out there because it's that experience.
Oh, you very much do. I mean, uh, it's one thing where when I walked in, the lady behind the counter, she told me that I wanted to talk to Mr. Pete. That was who I wanted. But Mr. Pete's outside taking his little break. He'll be in later. Everyone seemed to have a very familiar relationship. They felt like people who had worked together for generations. And Mr. Pete, he was, very kind, very cool older gentleman. But, he was like, you make sure you talk to Miss Laverne Moses. And she was the lady back behind the counter in the kitchen making all those amazing $4 burgers and fish sandwiches and this slow cooker full of her chili, which is Laverne's chili, just famous, so famous that the lettering on that, push letter board with the Coca-Cola sign above it that we've seen in those kind of stores, Laverne's chili had the biggest font size of those push-in letters. And it's in this just very humble slow cooker outside. But she was such a wonderful person, and she was warm. She spoke of being there because she just liked the people, the customers. They knew her. She's sort of a generational force. She actually had been involved with the store longer than the current owner, Mr. Pete. So she outdates him.
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought it was just a magical story that, this lady wants to be here and feels such a connection to this community and her customers and her fellow employees that she just braves that heat back there in that tiny kitchen and puts out these amazing burgers, and people are happy to see her, and she seems just as happy to see them and interact.
And it's amazing that this is in a metro area. We've taken a lot of trips, and recently, earlier this year, we went to the Acadia, Louisiana, and pretty much every gas station you went to had amazing food, blue plate specials, fantastic. These are small towns of maybe 500, 700 people. But when you have that log cabin doing amazing food and just feels like home, and it's the eighth largest metropolitan area in the country, that's pretty special.
And again, you would expect to see a place like this on any of the highways that run in and out of all the Georgia cities. It wouldn't at all be out of place there. It's just very interesting and unique and special that it sits where it does at Mount Perrin and Northside Drive. That's just, an area where it shows that community wants it to hang around. I think it has a way of grounding the people who are in walking distance, who obviously could walk a little bit longer. Maybe they drive. They'd probably have their butler give them a ride to some of those ritzier stores, the Dior and all of those things over in the shops at the Villages of Buckhead. But it's just, I think it makes even the folks who have obviously massive amounts of money and some level of privacy from being in this very, quiet and calm neighborhood. They walk in and they feel like they still have a connection and they're still people just like everybody else. It has a special place in that area. It's very cool.
Yeah, and I know we have the NACS Show has the room block that extends all the way to Buckhead. So I think some people are pretty lucky that they just found a find that's pretty close to some hotels.
Yeah.
Second one that you found or wrote about is Acres Mill Food Market. And the story there is almost like there's two great food places together and they somehow coexist and make it all work. One of them is theirs, one of them is neighboring, no financial relationship at all.
That's right. It's one of the most famous barbecue restaurants in the city in terms of heirloom market barbecue. It's a married couple. It's a Korean, but also some Texas mixed in. So it's sort of like a barbecue fusion, but they just do an amazing job. And it's off in this little cut on Acres Mill Road where you have to sort of be looking for it and you have to have an intentionality of going to that convenience store. So this place that was clearly popular with the residents of that area who were a little bit locked in because of the interstate being over there. So they get a lot of traffic from folks coming or going home and apartments nearby and houses. And I think the gentleman, the owner, Faisal, he was such a cool guy. Like I said, wearing this Seinfeld T-shirt, and talking about having to kind of act a little bit tough with some people who were coming in and looking to hog up spaces in the parking lot because they wanted to eat their barbecue forever. So I like that there was some conflict in the sense that he's making sure that his store is up to the standards that he needs, and that they have a good working relationship despite no business arrangement other than sharing the property. But
Hmm.
yeah, I love that he made sure that he had some really high quality TV dinners and frozen pizzas in that in his cooler, and some good wines, but not too good of wines, because he said he didn't have any smash and grab. So he's like
Hmm.
he's very thoughtful about what he's doing, and the fact that there's that great barbecue restaurant next door. He's smart about the way that he offsets what they have with what he could offer as well. So I thought that was just a really interesting dichotomy.
Yeah, and the barbecue place is Heirloom Market Barbecue. It was they were nominated for a James Beard Foundation award previously, so another thing in common with you there, Mike, with the James Beard nomination for the writing. Um, so yeah, a lot of times I think convenience stores look at whether it's a food truck that's parked outside that has great food or something like that. There can be that tension, but when it works and when two businesses find a way to coexist, or maybe even one plus one is more than two. It's kind of a cool story to see how you can make it all work, because things are complicated in life.
And it also, I mean, one of the things that I know just from being around, I in my duties as a food and culture journalist, I was covering the opening of Heirloom Market back when it opened more than a decade ago. And one of the things people always said about it is like, oh yeah, have you been to that place? It's like attached to this kind of old, gas station. They actually don't sell gas at Acres Mill Food Mart, but it looks like this kind of like very neighborhoodish, little convenience store, and people were very endeared by it. It actually seemed to have given Heirloom Market a little bit more street credibility as a kind of this shacky thing that's built onto this convenience store. And they've been able to expand out and beautify it with this mural in their patio and the setup of their smoker. So it all frames it very well. And I think it's made both businesses a lot more successful. But it's great to see them turn that tension into a good working relationship that people just enjoy them being and coexisting in the same place.
So, want to cover the third one of the three that you wrote for the NACS magazine, Westview Corner Grocery, and there's a lot to talk about here. But
Yeah,
I'll
I
let you
I
start with
mean,
that one.
yeah, I thought that this it's a place that is not far from where I went to college here in Atlanta at Morehouse College. So it's it's in Westview, which is right next to West End, and these are historically black neighborhoods and communities. And so this building, when it was constructed, was a Kroger, but it was a very kind of shortened and abbreviated Kroger. And the neighborhood had kind of fallen into some disrepair and some disinvestment, and people kind of moved in and out. And it's on the resurgence. And the owners of Westview Corner of Grocery, it was pretty risky when they decided we're going to put a really high quality shop here. It's not going to be your full out grocery store, but it's clearly a little bit more than a convenience store as well. So they've done a magnificent job of curating some high quality, goods, of offering various foods. There's a coffee corner in the back, but also opening that up to various vendors who come in and offer different food products. When I was there were ladies selling this blends of juices and different types of sort of like smoothies and sort of healthy cocktails. The name was like Plant Lady Juice Company. But they were back there all smiles and offering samples and talking to the management there, Delaney Williams. He was talking about how that's important to their community model, is letting in those local artisans and people who were making foods at home, funnel cakes and whatnot, and tamales. So I just thought that going there and seeing that this is a place with some roots as a grocery store that was a little bit abbreviated, and they've taken that forward to something that's much more community driven with some really great products. I really enjoyed being there. I mean, honestly, and I don't know if I put this in the story, but I got a couple of bottles of wine that were far better than I would normally get at a convenience store. So I'll
Mhm.
probably be back sooner than later over there.
Well, the one thing that really struck me is a lot of times you talk about supporting or working together with local business, just like we talked about with the barbecue place in Acres Mill. But the pop-up chefs in the corner in Westview Corner Grocery, where there's just a spot where there's rotating local chefs that provide something special, and could be tamales, it could be other things like peanut brittle.
Yeah, the lentil soups and walnut tacos and things. So, also some things that are, you wouldn't think that you would find in a convenience store like that. Again, at Mount Perrin, you've got your $4 burgers, and next to Acres Mill, you got this really good Korean Texan fusion barbecue. And here you have lentil soup and walnut tacos and tamales and things. But I just thought it's also representative of, again, that global nature of Atlanta. And, historically Black, but also great tamales and, people bringing in juices and really changing the idea of what type of things you expect from a convenience store that's selling things that sure you can consume. And don't get me wrong, they had some pork skins and all kind of stuff that, the nutritional value may be a little bit different than some of the other lentil soups. But I just thought that was just such a great range, and it offers some options to a neighborhood that it's not far from a traditional grocery store. There's a Kroger within very close walking distance, but it still offers things that are very special for members of that community who might not see those kinds of things every day. And the people there have a great spirit. So it's one of my favorite shops in the city, I think.
Well, thank you for giving us this preview. For anybody going to the NACS Show, there's 3 places that are just off the beaten path. We could have another episode talk about Racetrack or QT or Golden Pantry. I was at this one Golden Pantry in Athens that's part of an apartment complex. It was incredible, just great food. A lot of cool things going on in Atlanta. And I like, Mike, that you are a culture and food writer, because I heard you talk just as much about the people as you did about the food, and they do go hand in hand. Otherwise, it's a vending machine. And there's something communal about food. You celebrate it. It's who makes it, who brings it to you, just the whole experience. So how do people find out some of the other stories and check out your writing besides NACS Magazine and learn a little bit more about food and culture and some of the things that you find special?
Well, I would love for people to keep up with what I'm writing, and I'm pretty active on Twitter at Michael B. Jordan, and yes, that is exactly like the basketball player and actor. So I just happen to have had that name for all 45 years of my life. But at Michael B. Jordan on Twitter, I have my online portfolio of works is MikeJordanOnline.com. But I'm also, you can find me at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I've written quite extensively for the Wall Street Journal, for Eater Atlanta, for Southern Living. You can even look at National Geographic, and I did a cover story package for them on the American South and did a lot of the top chefs in the country for folks coming over from across the pond. So I'm all over the place. But I mean, if all else fails, Google Mike Jordan writer. If you look up Michael B. Jordan or Michael Jordan on the search engines, you'll probably come across somebody else. And, as much as I'd like to claim some of their wealth, I can't claim that that's who you would be reaching if you look for me. But Mike Jordan, and please let me know. Feel free to reach out to me. I love to hear from people. And if you find some stuff, don't assume I know where all the good food is. You want to share something I might not know about it, please tell me. I will return the favor.
Well, and then maybe next time we have you on, you can talk about when you got Michael and Michael B. To go visit some of those places that you discovered. And you're a great ambassador for the South and for Atlanta, the broader Atlanta area. So thanks for joining us today, Mike. And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.